Okay, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about the subdominant and the dominant and how it can be used in a tonic expansion. So we should already understand the phrase model where you've got your tonic, it's expanded for several measures, and then you get some sort of predominant. We're talking about that initial tonic expansion, generally 3/4 of the phrase where you have the tonic being expanded with various devices. So two of those could be the subdominant or the dominant chord. So your predominant function, it requires a movement to the dominant. When you don't have a predominant that moves to the dominant, the chord is just expanding the harmonic area. So if we look at this example here, we have the 1 going to a 4/6/4 to a 1. This is your typical pedal or neighboring 6/4 progression. This would just be an expansion because this 4 chord is not going to the dominant. Same with the second example, just a little bit different voicing, the 1 4/6/4 1. So you could also do that with a passing 6/4. You probably wouldn't do it with a cadential 6/4 because that's typically going to be used for the end of a phrase, and a cadential 6/4 will end up going to the dominant. So in this case, we are just expanding a tonic area. When you are moving to the dominant and it's serving as part of the phrase model, then you would label it with a PD. In this example, since we are not moving to the dominant, and it's not serving a predominant function, it's just acting as a 4 chord, we do not label this with the PD function. So you label the 4 chord with Roman numerals, but don't use PD if it doesn't serve a predominant function. Just remember that. Without that dominant sequence, the subdominant serves as an expansion only. So 1/4/1 would be one example of that. So the dominant in tonic expansions, really kind of the same thing. The tonic can be expanded by both 5 and 5/7 chords. When you have a 5 or a 5/7 chord, you still want that leading tone to resolve up. In the case of the 5/7 chord, you want the 7th of the 5/7 to resolve down, or you can think of it as a 4th scale degree if you're in major or minor key, because the 4th scale degree, of course, is going to be F. So good voice leading between the soprano and the bass is important. So typically, when you're just expanding the dominant, you'll move from a 1 to a 7 to a 1. Another way of doing this, which is actually not written here, is if you move from soprano 3rd scale degree to the 4th to the 5th. That's another way to do it. You can't use unequal fifths, so that's when you move from a diminished fifth into a perfect fifth. Remember that unequal fifths they go both ways. You can either move from a diminished fifth to a perfect fifth, or a perfect fifth to a diminished fifth. But that diminished fifth needs to resolve inwards. So that's why the only one that we talk about when a theorist says don't use unequal fifths, they're just referring to the one that doesn't resolve inwards. So if you move from a diminished fifth to a perfect fifth, you wouldn't be resolving to a 3rd, and that would be an issue. So here are some of the things you are permitted to do and some things you should avoid in that tonic expansion. If you have any leaps in the bass, as long as they're resolved, that's okay. So remember from counterpoint, if you haven't taken that, go check out the counterpoint slides. If we have a leap, like here you have a perfect 4th, typically you'd want that to resolve in the other direction. Here we have a leap, it resolves in the other direction, so this is okay. Double neighbors are okay between the soprano and the bass. So notice here is your starting pitch, this is sort of your ending pitch. So this would be considered a lower neighbor that comes up to the C, and this would be considered from C to D to C, an upper neighbor. So when you put these two combined, they're considered to be double neighbors. And then if you have the bass going as well, you should generally move in contrary motion. So this one goes down, this one goes up. As this goes up, this goes down, this goes up, this goes down. So you want to watch for that double neighbor, that contrary motion. As long as you have that, contrary motion makes a lot of things okay that would otherwise not be okay. Dissonant leaps are okay as long as you have a good resolution. So in order to figure out a dissonant leap, we'd actually have to turn the second measure into C minor. So if we had B flat, E flat, and A flat in the key signature, and you made this a B natural because the leading tone, you'd have an E flat going down to a B natural. That would be okay as long as it resolves up. So that's perfectly fine. So at this point, you should write down this chord progression, attempt to play it on the piano, try to visualize what it sounds like in your head. So maybe play the bottom line and try and sing or mentally imagine the top line, and then do the alto line and then the tenor line. And you should always try and hear these internally as well as try and play them on the piano. Then complete a Roman numeral analysis, come back to see if you got the answer right. So I'll give you 5 seconds and I'm going on to the next slide. Okay, so press pause if you haven't. Make sure you write down your chord progression. Okay, so here are your answers. Notice the 1 goes to a 5-4-2. That 7th of the 5 chord, it resolves down, leading tone resolves up. That always has to happen. And because of this, the 4-2 will pretty much always resolve to a 1-6 because of that 7th chord tendency tone that has to resolve down. Here, going from 1-6 to 5-6-5, 5-6-5 pretty much has to go to a 1 chord. A 1-6 would be awkward because the leading tone wouldn't resolve. So that leading tone, always got to resolve it. And here's your 7th, it's coming down. Remember, your 7 chord would be G, so G, B, D, and F. F is a 7th, B is a leading tone. Here, we have a 1 going to a 5-4-3, going to a 6-5. We don't need to write 5 again, but if you did, that'd be fine. And then this just resolves up to a 1 chord. Notice how the 7th holds over, and then it eventually resolves at the end. This is what happens when you have 2 5 chords in a row. You tend to keep the common tones the same. And then this B here, it really does resolve, but it waits a little bit until the next chord change. So what we see here is the 1 chord is being expanded by the 5-4-2, and it just resolves to sort of a 1-6 chord. Notice how you've got your 5 chord on a weak beat, but it's also a very weak 5 chord because the 7th is in the bass. That creates the sensation that maybe this is just an expansion. If this was a cadence, we'd probably see this on a weak beat, and then the 1 chord would hit on a downbeat. All of these, the 1 chord is going to be on a weak beat. So here we just have a 1-6 chord that's being expanded by the 5-6-5. Here you've got 2 5 chords, a 5-4-3 and a 5-6-5, that's being expanded. It's just expanding that tonic area. And so we don't really know without the actual phrase in front of us, but it's very likely, considering that these 1 chords come on weak beats, that these are all just tonic expansions. Another big clue is that the 5-4-2, that's not one of the stronger resolutions. It's not as powerful as a 5-7 coming to 1. 5-6-5 is also weakened by the fact that it's inversion. These two are also weakened by the fact that it's just cycling through various inversions of the 5 chord. And this double neighboring motion, it creates a strong need to resolve, but it doesn't resolve until a weak beat. So very likely this is not going to be the end of our phrase.